Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really critical and honestly completely misunderstood aspect of sustainability reporting in the aerospace and defense industry. We're going to set up an epic showdown. On one side, we have a massive, multi-billion-dollar aerospace prime contractor. On the other side, a tiny, highly specialized parts supplier. We're going to compare their environmental scorecards, and I promise you, what you see at first glance is going to be totally deceiving. It's what I like to call the David versus Goliath ESG illusion. So let's jump right in. All right, let's get into the data. Our Goliath, the big defense prime, generated a staggering 50,000 metric tons of hazardous waste last year, according to their raw ESG reports. Meanwhile, our David, the small parts supplier, just 50 tons in that exact same time frame. Now, if you're an analyst or an investor just glancing at these raw numbers, your immediate reaction is probably shock, right? I mean, the defense prime looks like an absolute environmental nightmare. They're producing 1,000 times more hazardous waste. But hold on a second. This really forces us to stop and ask a critical question. Is the giant really failing that badly at managing their waste? Or is this raw data somehow lying to us? You see, in sustainability accounting, absolute numbers rarely tell the whole story. If we judge these two companies solely on those raw figures, we are essentially punishing the defense prime just for existing at a massive scale. We're definitely missing a crucial piece of the puzzle here, and it's one that completely changes the narrative. The fundamental problem is this. Looking at raw numbers without any context is literally like comparing apples to asteroids. It is completely, hopelessly unbalanced. Just think about what these two entities actually do. Our Goliath is a massive contractor. They're building incredibly complex space vehicles, military aircraft, naval ships. They operate these sprawling, huge global manufacturing facilities. Our David, on the flip side, might literally just be a small machine shop making a single, highly specific little pin for an aircraft's landing gear. Of course, the prime contractor is going to produce more total waste. If we don't factor in the immense difference in the scale of their operations, our comparison is completely useless. We absolutely have to find a way to level the playing field. And that is exactly where activity metrics come in. These are defined by the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, or SASB. Simply put, activity metrics quantify the scale of a company's specific activities or operations. And the key here is that they are intended to be used alongside those raw numbers to normalize the data. Think of normalization as the secret decoder ring that analysts use to figure out who is actually performing better. It creates a fair apples-to-apples comparison, regardless of how big or small the company is. If we look directly at the SASB standard for the aerospace and defense industry, we find two specific activity metrics that companies in this sector are actually asked to report. First up, we have RTAE000.A, which covers production by reportable segment. And second, we have RTAE000.B, which is simply the number of employees. By requiring companies to disclose these two data points, the SASB framework is handing us the exact tools we need. We can use them to scale massive waste or energy numbers down to a manageable level, allowing us to fairly compare our giant prime contractor directly to our tiny parts supplier. Let's break each of these down really quickly. Okay, so the first activity metric, RT-000.A. This asks companies to report their production numbers. But notice, it doesn't just ask for one giant total count. It specifically breaks production down into 5 distinct categories: ground vehicles, aircraft, marine vehicles, vehicle and aircraft components, and finally, space and weapon systems. Now, why does this matter? Well, because building a massive marine vehicle has a vastly different energy and waste profile than manufacturing a tiny vehicle component. By grouping production units into these specific buckets, analysts can compare the sustainability metrics of an aircraft division at one company directly against the aircraft division of another. It ensures the comparison is as accurate and fair as possible. Now let's look at the second activity metric, RTAE000.B, the sheer number of employees. This is such a fantastic, straightforward proxy for the scale of a company's operations. Let's apply this back to our David and Goliath. Our Goliath, the massive defense prime, has a sprawling global workforce of 100,000 employees. Our David, that highly specialized parts supplier, has a tight-knit team of just 50 employees. I mean, when you look at it that way, the scale difference is just breathtaking. The prime has 2,000 times the workforce of the supplier. Keep these exact numbers in your head because we're about to use them to finally solve our hazardous waste mystery. So here is the incredibly simple normalization math that financial and ESG analysts use every single day to uncover the truth. Step 1, you take that raw ESG data, so in our case, the total tons of hazardous waste, and that becomes your numerator. Step 2, you divide it by your chosen activity metric, which is your denominator. We're going to use the number of employees we just talked about. And step 3, you calculate the result to discover the company's true efficiency. Literally, this simple division just strips away all the advantages or disadvantages of size, and it leaves us with a pure performance rate. All right, let's actually run the numbers. For Goliath, our defense prime, we divide their 50,000 tons of raw hazardous waste by their 100,000 employees. The result? 0.5 tons of waste generated per employee. Now for David, our part supplier, we divide their 50 tons of raw waste by their 50 employees, and that results in 1.0 ton of waste generated per employee. The math has completely flipped our initial assumption entirely upside down. Think about this. When we finally compare apples to apples, using activity metrics, the Goliath Defense Prime operates at 0.5 tons per employee, while the small parts supplier operates at 1.0 ton per employee. The massive defense prime is actually twice as efficient at minimizing hazardous waste per unit of human capital as the small supplier. No way, right? What looked like a total environmental nightmare on the surface is, in reality, a highly optimized, incredibly efficient manufacturing operation once you finally factor in the massive scale at which they operate. If there is one absolutely core takeaway I want you to remember from this explainer, it is this. Raw ESG numbers are effectively meaningless without activity metrics to scale and normalize the data, truly. Whether you're looking at total energy consumed, the total number of data breaches, or product safety recalls, a massive number doesn't automatically mean bad management, and a tiny number doesn't automatically mean good management. Scale is the lens through which all sustainability data has to be viewed if it's going to have any real value for investors and analysts. Which brings us to our final thought for today. If the David versus Goliath illusion can hide a company that's actually twice as efficient behind a massive, scary-looking raw number, you really have to ask yourself, what other raw numbers are hiding the truth in your portfolio right now? The next time you're reading through an annual report or some environmental disclosure, I challenge you to hunt for the denominator. Find those activity metrics, do the division yourself, and uncover the real story. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the data.